Hello, hello, hello. We are getting ready to read chapter 4 of the Christmas box. Sorry, guys. And it's titled The Dream, the Angel, and the Letter. I don't know about your house today. You Maine people are probably very cold. You Ohio people may be a little chilly. But we were hot today. We got a lot of rain at one point when another band came over of the little tropical depression that's way south of here. So we did get some rain. But other than that, it's been a nice quiet day. Hot, muggy, typical Florida weather. Let's see. Sorry about that roof line. Does that drive you crazy up there? Because it's kind of horizontal, but it's kind of like cutting off. What if I straighten it? Does that look better? You guys don't care, do you? All right. The Dream, the Angel, and the Letter, Chapter 4. I don't recall the exact night when the dreams began, the angel dreams. It should be stated that I am a believer in angels, though not the picture book kind with wings and harps. Such angelic accoutrements seem as nonsensical to me as devils sporting horns and carrying pitchforks. To me, angel wings are merely symbolic of their role as divine messengers. Notwithstanding my rather dogmatic opinions on the matter, the fact that the angel is my dream, descended from the sky with outspread wings, did not bother me. In fact, the only thing I found disturbing at all about the dream was its frequent reoccurrence and the dream's strange conclusion. In the dream, I find myself alone in a large, open field. The air is filled with soft, beautiful strains of music flowing as sweet and melodic as a mountain brook. I look up and see an angel with wings outspread, descending gradually from heaven. Then, when we are not an arm's length removed, I look into its cherubic face, its eyes turn up towards heaven, and the angel turns to stone. Though I have vague recollections of the dream haunting my sleep more than once since we moved into the Parkin home, it seemed to have grown clearer and more distinct with each passing slumber. This night it was alive, rich in color and sound and detail, occupying my every thought with its surrealism. I woke suddenly, expecting all traces of the nocturnal vision to vanish with my consciousness, but it didn't. Do you know what a nocturnal vision is? Nocturnal means night, and of course a vision is a dream, so it's a dream at night. But it didn't just disappear. He still remembered it. A soft, silvery tune plucked sweetly as a lullaby of unknown origin. Except tonight, the music had an origin. I sat up in my bed, listened intently while my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I found the flashlight kept in the pine nightstand next to our bed, pulled on a terry cloth robe, and walked quietly from the room following the music. I felt my way down the hall, past the nursery where I stopped and looked in at Jenna. She lay fast asleep, undisturbed by the tones. I followed the music to the end of the hall, pausing where the melody seemed to have originated from behind the attic door. I grasped the handle and opened the door slowly. The flashlight illuminated the room, creating long, creepy shadows. Apprehensively, I climbed the stairs toward the music. The room was still, and except for the music, lifeless. As I panned the room with the light, my heart quickened. The cradle was uncovered. The dusty, draped sheet that had concealed it now lay crumpled at its base on the attic floor. Anxiously, I continued my examination until I had centered the light on the source of the enchanted disturbance. It was the ornate heirloom box that Barry and I had discovered the afternoon that we had moved in our belongings, the Christmas box. I hadn't known at the time it was capable of music. How odd it should start playing in the middle of the night. I looked around once more to be sure that I was alone, then balanced the flashlight on one end so that its beam illuminated the rafters and lit the whole attic. I lifted the box and inspected it for a lever with which to turn off the music. The box was dusty and heavy and appeared just as we had seen it a few days previous. I inspected it more closely, but could find no key and no spring. In fact, no mechanism of any type. It was simply a wooden box. I unclasped the silver buckle and opened the lid slowly. The music stopped. I moved the flashlight close to examine the box, Inside lay several parchment documents. I reached in and lifted the top page. It was a letter, a handwritten letter, brittle with age and slightly yellowed. I held it near the flashlight to read. The handwriting was beautiful and disciplined. December 6th, 1914. My beloved one. I stopped. I have never been one to revel in the intrusion of another's privacy, much less inclined to read someone else's correspondence. Why, then, I was unable to resist reading the letter is as much a mystery to me as was the parchment itself. So strong was the compulsion that I finished the letter without so much as a second thought into the matter. How cold the Christmas snow seems this year without you. Even the warmth of the fire does little but remind me of how I wish you were again by my side. I love you. How I love you. I did not know why the letter beckoned me or even what significance it carried. Who was this beloved one? Was this Mary writing? It had been written nearly 20 years before her husband had passed away. I set the letter back in the box and shut the lid. The music did not start up again. I left the attic and returned to my bed, pondering the contents of the letter. The mystery as to why the Christmas box had started playing music, even how it had played music, remained for the night unanswered. The next morning I explained the episode to an only slightly interested wife. So, didn't you hear anything last night? I asked. No music? No, Carrie answered, but you know I'm a pretty heavy sleeper. This is really strange, I said, shaking my head. So you heard a music box. What's so strange about that? It was more than that, I explained. Music boxes don't work that way. Music boxes play when you open them. This one stopped playing when I opened it, and the strangest part is that there didn't appear to be any mechanism to it. Maybe it was your angel making the music, she teased. Maybe it was, I said eerily. Maybe this is one of those mystical experiences. How do you even know the music was coming from the box? She asked skeptically. I'm sure of it, I said. I looked up and noticed the time. Darn, I'm going to be late and I'm opening up today. I threw on my overcoat and started for the door. Carrie stopped me. Aren't you going to kiss Jenna goodbye? She asked incredulously. I ran back to the nursery to give Jenna a kiss. I found her sitting in a pile of shredded paper with a pair of round-edged children's scissors in hand. Dad, can you help me cut these? She asked. Not now, honey. I'm late for work. The corners of her mouth pulled downwards in disappointment. When I get home, I hastily promised. She sat quietly as I kissed her on the head. I've got to go. I'll see you tonight. I dashed out of the room, nearly forgetting the lunch which Carrie had set by the door, and made my way through the gray, slushy streets to the formal wear shop. Each day as the first streaks of dawn spread across the blue winter morning sky, Mary could be found in the front parlor, sitting comfortably in a posh, overstuffed Turkish chair, warming her feet in front of the fireplace. In her lap lay the third Bible, the one that she had kept. This morning ritual dated decades back, but Mary could tell you the exact day it had begun. It was her morning constitutional for the spirit, she had told Carrie. During the Christmas season, she would read at length the Christmas stories of the Gospels, and it was here that she welcomed the small, uninvited guests. Well, good morning, Jenna, Mary said. Jenna stood at the doorway, still clothed in the red flannel nightshirt in which she almost always slept. She looked around the room, then ran to Mary. Mary hugged her tightly. What are you reading? A story? Jenny asked. A Christmas story, Mary said. Jenna's eyes lit up. She crawled onto Mary's lap and looked for pictures of reindeer and Santa Claus. Where are the pictures? She asked. Where's Santa Claus? Mary smiled. This is a different kind of Christmas story. This is the first Christmas story. It's about baby Jesus. Jenna smiled. She knew about Jesus. Mary? Yes, sweetheart. Will Daddy be here at Christmas? Why, of course, dear, she assured. She brushed the hair back from Jenna's face and kissed her forehead. You must miss him, don't you? He's gone a lot. Starting a new business takes a lot of work and a lot of time. Jenna looked up sadly. Is work better than here? No, no place is better than home. Then why does Daddy want to be there instead of here? Mary paused thoughtfully. I guess sometimes we forget, she answered, and pulled the little girl close. With the approach of the holidays, business grew increasingly busy, and though we welcomed the revenue, I found myself working long days and returning home late each night. In my frequent absence, Carrie had established the habit of sharing supper with Mary in the downstairs den. They had even adopted the ritual of sharing an after-dinner cup of peppermint tea near the fire. Afterwards, Mary would follow Carrie into the kitchen and help clean up the supper dishes, while I, if home by this time, would remain in the den and finish the day's books. Tonight the snow fell softly outside, contrasted by the sputtering and hissing of the warm fire crackling in the fireplace. Jenna had been sent up to bed, and as Carrie cleared the table, I remained behind, diving into a catalog of new-fashioned cummerbunds and matching band ties. Tonight Mary also remained behind, still sitting in the antique chair from which she always took her tea. Though she usually followed Carrie into the kitchen, sometimes, after she had finished her tea, she would doze quietly in her chair until we woke her and helped her to her room. Mary set down her tea, pushed herself up, and walked over to the cherry wood bookshelf. She pulled a book from the high shelf, dusted it lightly, and handed it to me. "Here is a charming Christmas tale. Read this to your little one." I took the book from her outstretched arm and examined the title, Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. "Thank you, Mary, I will." I smiled at her, set the book down, and went back to the catalog. Her eyes never left me. "No, right now. Read it to her now," she coaxed. Her voice was fervent, wavering only from her age. I laid my text down, examined the book again, then looked back up into her calm face. Her eyes shone with the importance of her request. "All right, Mary." I rose from the table and walked up into Jenna's room, wondering where I would catch up on my orders and what magic this old book contained to command such urgency. Upstairs, Jenna lay quietly in the dark. "Still awake, honey?" I asked. "Daddy, you forgot to tuck me in tonight." I switched on the light. "I did, didn't I? How about a bedtime story?" She jumped up in her bed, and with a smile that filled the tiny room, "What story are you going to tell?" she asked. "Mary gave me this book to read to you." "Mary has good stories, Dad." "Then it should be a good one," I said. "Does Mary tell you stories often?" "Every day." I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the old book. The spine was brittle and cracked a little as it opened. I cleared my throat and started reading aloud. "The little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did, Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning, for he was very busy, but she would not let him." "That's like you, Dad. You're real busy, too," Jenna observed. I grinned at her. "Yeah, I guess so." I continued reading. "Well, once there was a little pig. The little girl put her hand over his mouth and stopped him at the word. She said she had heard the big stories till she was perfectly sick of them." "Well, what kind of story shall I tell them?" "About Christmas. It's getting to be the season. It's past Thanksgiving already." "It seems to me," argued her papa, "that I've told as often about Christmas as I have about little pigs." "No difference. Christmas is more interesting." Unlike her story's counterpart, Jenna was long asleep before I finished the tale. Her delicate lips were drawn in a gentle smile, and I pulled the covers up tightly under her chin. Peace radiated from the tiny face. I lingered a moment, knelt down near her bed, and kissed her on the cheek, then walked back down to finish my work. I returned to the den to find the lavish drapes drawn tight, and the two women sitting together in the dim, flickering light of the fireplace talking peacefully. The soothing tones of Mary's voice resonated calmly through the room. She looked up to acknowledge my entrance. "Richard, your wife just asked the most intriguing question. She asked which of the senses I thought was most affected by Christmas." I sat down at the table. "I love everything about this season," she continued. "But I think what I love most about Christmas are its sounds. The bells of street corner Santa Clauses, the familiar Christmas records on the phonograph, the sweet, untuned voices of Christmas carolers, and the bustling downtown noises, the crisp crinkle of wrapping paper and department store sacks, and the cheerful Christmas greetings of strangers. And then there are the Christmas stories, the wisdom of Dickens and all Christmas storytellers." She seemed to pause for emphasis. "I love the sound of this season. Even the sounds of this old house take on a different character at Christmas. These Victorian ladies seem to have a spirit all their own." I heartily agreed, but said nothing. She reflected on the old home. "They don't build houses like this anymore. You've noticed the double set of doors in the front entryway?" We both nodded in confirmation. "In the old days, before the advent of the telephone," she winked. "I'm an old lady. I remember those days. We smiled. Back in those days when people were receiving callers, they would open the outer set of doors as a signal, and if the doors were closed, it meant they were not receiving callers. It seemed those doors were always open, all holiday long. She smiled longingly. It seems silly now. You can imagine that the foyer was absolutely chilly. She glanced over to me. Now I'm digressing. Tell us, Richard, which of the senses do you think are most affected by Christmas? I looked over at Carrie. The taste buds, I said flippantly. Carrie rolled her eyes. No, I take it back. I would say the sense of smell. The smells of Christmas. Not just the food, but everything. I remember once in grade school we made Christmas ornaments by poking whole cloves into an orange. I remember how wonderful it smelled for the entire season. I can still smell it. And then there's the smell of perfumed candles and hot wassail or creamy cocoa on a cold day, and the pungent smell of wet leather boots after my brothers and I had gone sledding. The smells of Christmas are the smells of childhood. My words trailed off into the silence as we all seemed to be caught in the sweet glaze of Christmas-time memories. And Mary nodded slowly, as if I had said something wise. It was the 6th day of December. Christmas was only 2.5 weeks away. I had already left for work, and Carrie had set about the rituals of the day. She stacked the breakfast dishes in the sink to soak, then descended the stairs to share in some conversation and tea with Mary. She entered the den where Mary read each morning. Mary was gone. In her chair lay the third Bible, Mary's Bible. Though we were aware of its existence, neither Carrie nor I had actually ever seen it. It lay on the cushion, spread open to the Gospel of John. Carrie gently slipped her hand under the book's spine and lifted the text carefully. It was older than the other two Bibles, its script more Gothic and graceful. She examined it closely. The ink appeared marred, smeared by moisture. She ran a finger across the page. It was wet, moistened by numerous round drops. Teardrops. She delicately turned through the gold-edged pages. Many of the leaves were spoiled and stained from tears. Tears from years past, pages long dried and wrinkled. But the open pages were still moist. Carrie laid the book back down on the chair and walked out into the hall. Mary's thick wool coat was missing from the lobby's crested halltree. The inner foyer doors were ajar, and at the base of the outer set of doors, snow had melted and puddled on the cold marble floor, revealing Mary's departure. Mary's absence left Carrie feeling uneasy. Mary rarely left the house before noon, and when she did, typically went to great lengths to inform Carrie of the planned excursion days in advance. Carrie went back upstairs until 45 minutes later, when she heard the front door open. She ran down to meet Mary, who stood in the doorway, wet and shivering from the cold. "Mary, where have you been?" Carrie exclaimed. "You look freezing." Mary looked up sadly. Her eyes were swollen and red. "I'll be all right," she said, and then without an explanation disappeared down the hall to her room. After brunch, she again put on her coat to leave. Carrie caught her in the hall on the way out. "I'll be going out again," she said simply. "I may return late." "What time shall I prepare supper?" Carrie asked. Mary didn't answer. She looked directly at her, then walked out into the sharp winter air. It was nearly 8:30 when Mary returned that evening. Carrie had grown increasingly concerned over her strange behavior and had begun looking out the balcony window every few minutes for Mary's return. I had already arrived home from work, been thoroughly briefed on the entire episode, and like Carrie, anxiously anticipated her return. If Mary had looked preoccupied before, she was now positively engrossed. She uncharacteristically asked to take supper alone, but then invited us to join her for tea. "I'm sure my actions might seem a little strange," she apologized. She set her cup down on the table. "I've been to the doctor today on account of these headaches and vertigo I've been experiencing." She paused for a long, uncomfortable period. I sensed she was going to say something terrible. "He says that I have a tumor growing in my brain. It's already quite large, and because of its location, they cannot operate." Mary looked straight ahead now, almost through us, yet her words were strangely calm. "There is nothing they can do. I haven't wired my brother in London. I thought you should know." Carrie was the first to throw her arms around Mary. I put my arms around the two of them, and we held each other in silence. No one knew what to say. Denial, perhaps, is a necessary human function to cope with the heartaches of life. The following weeks proceeded largely without incident, and it became increasingly tempting to delude ourselves into complacency, imagining that all was well and that Mary would soon recover. As quickly as we did, however, her headaches would return, and reality would slap our faces as brightly as the frigid December winds. There was one other curious change in Mary's behavior. Mary seemed to be growing remarkably disturbed by my obsession with work, and now took it upon herself to interrupt my endeavors at increasingly frequent intervals. Such was the occasion the evening that she asked the question, "Richard, have you ever wondered what the first Christmas gift was?" Her question broke my engrossment in matters of business and weekly returns. I looked up. "No, I can't say that I've given it much thought. Probably gold, frankincense, or myrrh. If in that order, it was gold." I sensed that she was unsatisfied with my answer. "If an appeal to King James will answer your question, I'll do so on Sunday," I said, hoping to put the question to rest. She remained unmoved. "This is not a trivial question," she said firmly. "Understanding the first gift of Christmas is important." "I'm sure it is, Mary, but this is important right now." "No," she snapped. "You don't know what is important right now." She turned abruptly and walked from the room. I sat quietly alone, stunned from the exchange. I put away the ledger and climbed the stair to our room. As I ready for bed, I posed to Carrie the question Mary had asked. "The first gift of Christmas?" she asked sleepily. "Is that a trick question?" "No, I don't think so. Mary just asked me and was quite upset that I didn't know the answer." "I hope she doesn't ask me then," Carrie said, rolling over to sleep. I continued to ponder the question of the first gift of Christmas until I gradually fell off in slumber. That night, the angel haunted my dreams. The following morning, at the breakfast table, Carrie and I discussed the previous evening's confrontation. "I think that the cancer is finally affecting her," I said. "How is that?" Carrie asked. "Her mind. She's starting to lose her mind." "She's not losing her mind," she said firmly. "She's as sharp as you and me." "Such a strong no," I said defensively. "I'm with her all day. I ought to know." "Then why is she acting this way, asking weird questions?" "I think she's trying to share something with you, Rick. I don't know what it is, but there is something." Carrie walked over to the counter and brought a jar of honey to the table. "Mary is the warmest, most open individual I've ever met, except—" She paused. "Do you ever get the feeling that she's hiding something?" "Something?" "Something tragic, terribly tragic. Something that shapes you and changes your perspective forever." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Suddenly, Carrie's eyes moistened. "I'm not so sure that I do either. But there is something. Have you ever seen the Bible that she keeps in the den?" I shook my head. "The pages are stained with tears." She turned away to gather her thoughts. "I just think that there is a reason that we're here. There is something she's trying to tell you, Rick. You're just not listening." And that's the end of chapter 4. It was quite long. I hope you enjoyed it.